Well, you've seen them on the news almost every day. It's a hit-and-run accident. Actually, it's a crime, and nobody knows that more than Mike Gatto, a member of the California State Assembly. He chairs the Assembly Appropriations Committee and is a leading lawmaker on the issue of hit-and-run crimes in California. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Assemblyman, I have to tell you, a lot of people know you because of a terrible thing that happened to your family late last year, the death of your father in a murder in Silver Lake. Before we get into legislation, let's talk just a moment about that. Joe Gatto, a beloved retired teacher, murdered in his home. Is there any update on the investigation?
There's no update, unfortunately. We've issued a reward in the case, and anybody with information, of course, has been encouraged to call the Los Angeles Police Department. Anything that they saw that night, perhaps something out of the ordinary in the Silver Lake neighborhood or near the reservoir. My father lived very close to the reservoir. We'd appreciate any and all tips, but unfortunately, there have been no breaks so far.
And no motive, anything like that?
No motive that we're able to discuss, and nothing really that I think is a promising lead. We're keeping our fingers crossed that something will break in the very near future.
Our condolences to you and your family. I know
you.
that's been very, very difficult the past few months.
Thank you.
On to legislation. You had a bill that extended the statute of limitations on those accused of fleeing an accident. That was signed by the governor of California. You followed up with a new bill pertaining to hit-and-run accidents or hit-and-run crimes. Explain it.
So last year we did lengthen the amount of time for the statute of limitations for hit-and-runs in California. And the theory was that people were just trying to wind down the clock. They would get into one of these accidents and they knew that if they just wound down the clock, they could not be prosecuted. We talked with people who study this issue, and they told us that they think we need mandatory license suspension for hit-and-run accidents, and I'll tell you why. If you hit somebody right now and you don't pull over, chances are leaving that person on the side of the road, and everybody thinks, Los Angeles, tons of traffic. Every road has tons of people on it, but that's really not the case. In many cases, if you do not pull over, there is nobody else on that road to render aid. There's nobody else on that road to call 911. And so if at that moment, the driver is not aware that there could be staunch penalties, in many cases, there's not an incentive to stop. And you imagine right now, the way that the current law applies to hit and runs is after the fact, if there was a serious injury, if the injury that you caused turned out to be serious, there's one punishment, and if the injury that you caused turned out not to be serious, there's another punishment.
How important is this in terms of dealing with hit-and-run accidents? How many do we have each year in Southern California?
So state statistics say that in Los Angeles County alone, there are at least 20,000 hit-and-runs each year. Last year, there were some people who said that we had as many as 40,000 in Los Angeles County. At least 4,000 of those lead to serious injury.
Do we know why?
We don't. There's lots of different speculation out there. Part of it could just be that we have such a car culture and there's a lot of roads. There's lots of miles of roads in Los Angeles. It's a very big place.
Some people don't want to bring this up because it's politically sensitive. But even LA City Councilman Gil Cedillo said that by granting driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, you remove an incentive on the part of some on the road to flee. Is that an issue?
Well, if Gil Cedillo, who's worked so closely on these issues, thinks that law changed last year will provide some kind of relief valve for this and will improve things, and I tend to agree. But I think what's more important is to get in the popular mindset the same message that was got in the popular mindset in the 1980s with respect to DUI. If you're involved in a DUI, your license is going to be suspended, period. Right now, again, it's determined after the fact. If you hit a cyclist and you think, well, I brushed him or her, and the injuries are not severe, and later on that's what it turns out to be, you pretty much get off scot-free. If that person is maimed or seriously injured, there's another penalty altogether. But how do you know at that moment? And what we need to do is we need to force people to stop, because our goal in this is not just to punish people, it's to force people to stop and to render aid and to call 911.
You also have a bill on a different topic, on the issue of education and abuse of children in a school district. Explain that.
Sure. So current law basically has a suggestion that school districts should train their employees on how to report instances of abuse and potential abuse when it's brought to the attention of a teacher or administrator. There is no uniform statewide policy, and it's horrible to imagine this, but there is no uniform statewide policy on how a school district employee or a administrator reports an incident of abuse or potential abuse. And so what has happened in a lot of these cases where there has been ongoing abuse is there will be one school district that thinks, well, I should call a DA. There's another school district that thinks I should call the police. There's another one who thinks that your reporting requirements are done as long as you tell a vice principal. What we really need is a statewide policy with training every year.
Who does the training?
I think there should be a statewide policy on a website, a state course that the state of California says, this is how you run these incidents at the flagpole, this is how you report these incidents, that each school district would then have to administer to their teachers and administrative personnel.
How would this solve a problem? What problem would this solve?
The problem that has emerged in a lot of these child abuse cases is that there were teachers who were, in many cases, made aware of these incidents. They did not know how to properly report it, and because of that, the abuse continued. There's
another debate taking place in Sacramento over a statewide ban on plastic bags. Is that going to happen?
I think it will. I think a lot of people think that it will, that a ban on plastic bags will solve some of the problems we have with litter, and I am in that camp. I think that's certainly something that's
But it
important.
has its own problems.
It does. Environmentalism is so much based on the decade often, and you imagine back in the 70s or 80s telling someone, we're going to demand that we cut down more trees to make paper bags, which are heavier and cost more fossil fuels to ship, because we don't want to have plastic bags anymore. People would think you're kind of crazy.
Final question. Toni Atkins, a woman from San Diego, is in line now to become the new California State Assembly Speaker. You were very much in her camp and helping in that campaign. Tell us, why do you think she's the appropriate person for that job?
She's mature, she's intelligent, she's got a really long history in the legislature of knowing how to deal with all the issues that the state of California faces. Willie Brown used to say that the speaker has 80 constituents, or 79 constituents, and it's all of your colleagues in the districts that they represent. And I think Toni will be a terrific speaker for the entire state of California.
Assemblyman Mike Gatto, Democrat of Los Angeles, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Up next, another rail line now being built in Southern California, the Crenshaw Line, part of a resurgence of rail in Southern California. That when we return.